Fear. The fundamental difference between American police and their international counterparts begins with training duration. According to CBS News and multiple research studies, U.S. officers receive an average of only 19 to 22 weeks of basic training. This contrasts sharply with the 3-year police education programs required in Finland, Norway, and the Netherlands, and the 2.5 years mandated in Germany, as reported by various academic institutions. In Japan, police recruits undergo between 15 and 21 months of training before they are considered ready for duty. This disparity in preparation time reflects a fundamental philosophical difference in how policing is approached globally. These in Finland and Norway, officers must attend their nation's 3-year police universities and leave with degrees equivalent to a bachelor's degree, with policing approached as an academic discipline comparable to teaching or nursing. European police training systems blur the distinction between training and education. Many countries offer programs that lead to associate degrees, professional education degrees, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, and even doctoral degrees within their police education systems. American police academies still resemble military boot camps, with emphasis on weapons, tactics, and defensive skills. Research shows that U.S. trainees spend 20 times as many hours learning about using force than they do learning de-escalation techniques. The content and focus of training also differs dramatically. With European programs incorporating extensive coursework in psychology, law, human rights, cultural awareness, and ethical decision-making. In Finland, use of force training doesn't begin until 4 months into the curriculum, when a Minneapolis police rookie would already have been awarded their badge and gun. Finnish students are still learning about legislation, criminal law, human rights, tours, and other backgrounds. Even after 3 years of college and practical experience, 30% of a Finnish student's final grade consists of personal interviews and psychological tests to ensure young officers can be trusted with their guns and power. Comprehensive approach to police education creates officers who view their role as public servants, trained in problem-solving and community engagement rather than primarily as law enforcers. The fragmented American system, with approximately 18,000 different police departments across 50 states with 50 different minimal standards for training and recruitment, creates chaos and inconsistency in police preparedness and professionalism. According to law enforcement experts, the structural differences in training philosophy produce measurably different outcomes in terms of police conduct, use of force incidents, and community relationships, with better trained international forces, demonstrating lower rates of violence and higher levels of public trust. Sources mentioned: CBS News, academic research institutions, law enforcement training standards, organizations. The legal standards governing police use of force in the United States deviate significantly from international norms. 2. According to legal experts and the U.S. Supreme Court rulings, force is permissible so long as the officer's use was objectively reasonable from the point of view of the officer, emphasizing how officers are acting in the heat of the moment. This American legal standard contrasts with the United Nations Center for Human Rights International Human Rights Standards for Law Enforcement, SQUIDS, which states that force can only be used when strictly necessary. Through European Union standard, states that force and lethal force are legally permissible only when absolutely necessary. According to Cambridge criminology professors, in the United States, if somebody doesn't drop a knife when an officer tells them to, even if they're not threatening somebody, the police can shoot and kill them. This would be considered murder in Europe. The law in the United States goes to extraordinary lengths to justify police preemptive use of shooting. Some European countries have implemented additional safeguards that further restrict the use of deadly force beyond what exists in American policing. All officers in certain jurisdictions must obtain permission from superiors before discharging their weapons, while others mandate that officers issue verbal warnings and warning shots before using lethal force against suspects. In Finland, it is not necessary and not allowed to put pressure on the neck or throat, a technique that would be prohibited under their national standards. The United States, far surpasses most wealthy democracies in killings by police. Research data shows us police killing thousands between 2013 and 2020, compared to just 254 deaths in Canadian police encounters. Some countries, like Finland and Norway, have gone years without any police killings. The United Nations Code of Conduct for Law Enforcement Officials, adopted in 1979, explicitly states that officers should only use force as a last resort. The philosophical difference extends to how officers are psychologically prepared for their work, with American training placing undue focus on the dangers of policing and teaching officers to be fearful of the communities they serve. Research indicates that despite the emphasis on officer safety, police work involves relatively low rates of actual danger. Yet, the training culture promotes a warrior mentality rather than a guardian approach. The consequences of these differing legal frameworks are stark and measurable. American officers operate with significantly more legal protection from prosecution after using force, creating less accountability and potentially encouraging more aggressive tactics. International officers face stricter scrutiny and legal consequences for improper use of force, which incentivizes de-escalation and restraint. These systemic differences reflect fundamentally different values about the relationship between police and citizens. 2. With international models emphasizing proportionality, necessity, and the preservation of life above all else, stands, while American standards prioritize officer discretion and split-second decision-making authority, even when deadly consequences result. Sources mentioned: U.S. Supreme Court / United Nations Center for Human Rights, European Union Legal Standards, Cambridge University Research. Many countries rely on independent oversight bodies with nationwide jurisdiction. Torin, according to international law enforcement studies. Denmark has an independent watchdog that reviews all misconduct complaints and alleged criminal offenses by police. In England and Wales, police forces are legally required to refer serious misconduct cases, including any killing by an officer, to an independent watchdog that also sets standards for how local departments should handle complaints. In contrast, U.S. law primarily allows police departments to investigate themselves, though exceptions exist in some states like New Jersey, which requires local departments to turn over investigations into officer-involved shootings to county or state authorities. The fragmented American system of police oversight varies greatly from city to city. Decentralization complicates interagency coordination and increases variability in accountability practices, slowing the implementation of reforms and limiting the effectiveness of efforts to improve officer accountability. European oversight mechanisms tend to be centralized at national or regional levels, providing consistent standards, procedures, and consequences across entire countries, rather than leaving accountability to thousands of individual local departments. The United Nations guidelines state that any effective police accountability system must increase civilian control over the police, investigate cases of misconduct, and act swiftly to address them, and reduce corruption. The structure of accountability systems reveals deeper differences in how democratic societies balance police authority with civilian control. There, in the United States, the extreme localization of policing creates a patchwork of accountability standards, where some communities have robust oversight, while others have virtually none. Some U.S. jurisdictions have adopted oversight models that include external monitors who evaluate entire police department systems, focusing on systemic problems such as organizational culture and operating procedures. One example is Los Angeles County's Office of Independent Review, a group of experienced civil rights attorneys who oversee internal investigations of the Sheriff's Department. These progressive models represent exceptions rather than the norm in American policing. The Department of Justice can pressure departments to address systemic issues using consent decrees or court-approved agreements between the DOJ and local law enforcement agencies. 14. Such decrees were signed during the Obama administration. Public participation in oversight also varies dramatically, with some American cities creating civilian review boards while others maintain closed systems where police unions and management resist external scrutiny. A key obstacle in police accountability is the lack of staff adherence to new Accountability technologies such as body cameras. Many officers and supervisors fear these tools will increase sanctioning for minor violations or reduce operational discretion, creating resistance, fueled by an internal culture rooted in loyalty to colleagues and distrust of superiors and citizens. Systems often mandate transparency measures that would be controversial in the United States. Including public databases of officer misconduct, require disclosure of use of force statistics, and civilian participation in disciplinary proceedings. If the structural differences in accountability reflect broader cultural attitudes. About police power. Sources mentioned: International Law Enforcement Studies / United Nations Guidelines, U.S. Department of Justice, Obama Administration records. Policing in the United States is characterized by approximately 18,000 different police departments, operating with 50 different minimal standards for training and recruitment. Law enforcement experts describe this as complete chaos in terms of consistency and professionalism. Unlike the pattern in many places in the world where law enforcement is exclusively a state or national function, policing in America is predominantly a matter for local municipal government. Federal police such as the FBI, Border Patrol, and D exist with jurisdiction limited to defined federal crimes. This decentralization creates significant disparities in resources, training quality, and operational capabilities between wealthy and poor communities. In the United States, municipalities and states can receive financial and material support from the federal government. The Department of Defense transfers excess military equipment to police, which has raised concerns that American police have become overly militarized. In Mexico, as in the United States, states and cities fund police forces to supplement federal law enforcement. Critics say the result is that wealthier areas have better trained and equipped forces. Australian and Western European cities generally don't fund their own police forces. Switzerland is one exception where many municipalities finance local departments to augment regional forces. The militarization of American policing represents a stark departure from international norms, where police are deliberately kept distinct from military forces both in appearance, equipment, and operational philosophy. European police forces typically operate with standardized equipment appropriate to civilian law enforcement, rather than military-grade weapons and vehicles. The funding structures also reveal different priorities, with American departments sometimes profiting from civil asset forfeiture, a practice that allows seizure of property from citizens who are never charged with crimes, creating perverse financial incentives. Thus, policing has drawn controversy over excessive fines, fees, and asset forfeiture practices where departments profit from seizing citizens' assets. International policing budgets are generally managed at national or regional levels, with greater transparency and less opportunity for local departments to generate revenue through enforcement activities. The organizational structure of American policing also creates barriers to implementing best practices and evidence-based reforms. When a successful intervention or training program proves effective in one jurisdiction, it cannot easily be mandated across the country due to the absence of central authority. U.S. police forces, unlike those in Europe, are decentralized and not beholden to clear standards set by a responsible central body. Other countries have direct oversight and can enact codes of conduct that reflect new evidence and best practices. The fragmentation extends to data collection, with no comprehensive national database of police shootings, misconduct complaints, or disciplinary actions, making it impossible to assess national trends or hold departments accountable through comparative analysis. This stands in contrast to many European nations, where centralized ministries collect and publish detailed statistics on police activities, allowing for evidence-based policymaking and public accountability. Sources mentioned: law enforcement, experts, Department of Defense reports, international policing standards organizations. As policing has a long history of discrimination. According to comprehensive research studies, Black Americans today are 20% more likely to have their vehicles pulled over and 3 times more likely than white Americans to be killed by police. Discriminatory policing contributes to high rates of incarceration among minorities. Source: oftentimes resulting in disenfranchisement, recidivism, and generational poverty. Worldwide, police often have tense relationships with minority communities. Racial, religious, and other minorities are also stopped more often by police in much of Europe despite generally lower crime rates among these groups. France has long struggled with rampant police targeting and abuse of Black and Arab people, which has at times sparked mass protests. Discrimination has dampened public confidence in law enforcement. Trust in police varies by race in the United States, where Black Americans are less trusting of police than others. Sure, Europeans typically trust police more than legal or political systems, though confidence in police is lower among certain minority groups than the general public. However, the scale and severity of discriminatory policing appears more pronounced in the United States than in comparable democracies, reflecting America's particular history of slavery, segregation, and ongoing racial inequality. 2. The militarized approach to policing in minority communities, combined with aggressive enforcement of minor offenses and widespread use of stop-and-frisk policies, has created deep mistrust between law enforcement and communities of color. According to recent survey, police in the United States spend more than 20% of their time responding to people with mental illness, yet they lack adequate training for these encounters. International approaches to mental health crises differ significantly. Some countries, like Sweden, have developed specialized mental health ambulances, dispatched alongside police units, staffed by healthcare professionals with access to medical records that police lack, recognizing that such situations should primarily be handled by trained health professionals rather than armed officers. Some countries have moved to diversify their forces to improve police-minority relations. U.S. law enforcement experts say police diversity increases innovation, minimizes biases, and improves community relations. Northern Ireland implemented a policy requiring that Catholics and Protestants each comprise half of police recruits. Trust in police institutions correlates strongly with perceptions of fairness, procedural justice, and accountability, 2 areas where American policing struggles compared to international counterparts. The emphasis on enforcement and arrest statistics in American policing, combined with revenue generation through fines and fees, creates incentives that damage community relationships, particularly in poor and minority neighborhoods where aggressive policing is most concentrated. Into international models that emphasize community policing, restorative justice, and social service coordination demonstrates that alternative approaches can maintain public safety while building rather than destroying trust between police and the communities they serve, suggesting that American policing's adversarial relationship with minority communities represents a policy choice rather than an inevitable feature of law enforcement. Sources mentioned / comprehensive research studies / recent law enforcement surveys, U.S. law enforcement experts.